here with Addisu Demissie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
So you have worked on the Obama campaign in 2008. You ran Cory Booker's campaign for Senate recently. Tell us what your takeaway is on local politics on the most recent primary election.
Well, I think a couple things. One, the turnout was obviously maybe the saddest, but the most poignant takeaway from what happened a couple weeks ago. You know, less than 30% here in the Bay Area, both in San Francisco and in Alameda County.
Why do you think that was?
You know, the top of the ticket, I think, is what drives turnout in any election. And in this election, there weren't really competitive races at the top of the ticket. There wasn't a lot to motivate people to get out there. And so it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate state of affairs. It's actually better in the Bay Area than it was across the state. But I think, you know, when we get to November, people are more used to voting. You're going to have obviously a higher turnout, still with no competitive races at the top of the ticket, and that's going to make it more difficult for Democrats, generally speaking.
Now, there are a couple of initiatives on the ballot in November. Is that going to help or hurt Democrats, you think?
I mean, I think it can only help to have anything on the ballot that's going to drive turnout. Really, lower turnout favors Republicans, higher turnout favors Democrats. But again, no competitive governor's race, no competitive lieutenant governor's race, attorney general's race. We are going to have some interesting things at the top of the ballot with the controller's race, which is going to, whoever wins, Perez or Yee, a Democrat versus a Republican. And obviously, I think the superintendent's race is actually going to be something pretty competitive. But in the end, it's still going to be a low turnout relative to certainly presidential years, and I even think relative to most midterm election years as well.
Now, another thing in November is the Oakland mayor's race. Now, you live in Oakland.
I am, my hometown.
You're an East Bay guy.
I am.
So what are your thoughts on the Oakland mayor's race so far?
Well, you know, we just saw Rebecca Kaplan, the at-large city council member, get into the race. That brings the total number of, I'd say, credible competitive candidates up to 6, which I think helps the mayor, honestly, Mayor Griffin Caen. You know, with 5 or potentially more credible candidates in the race, they obviously are going to split up the anti-Griffin Caen vote, which at this point, if you believe the polls, is somewhere between 60 and 75% of the electorate. Even with ranked choice voting, you know, if each of these candidates gets 10, 15%, you know, the mayor, as an incumbent, is going to start at an advantage, and likely, if the election were held today, I would think would win. That said, there's a lot of time, and I think all of the candidates who are in the race are probably looking at their own internal polls and looking even in the high single digits or in the teens and think that they have a chance to win. And in the end, I think that probably benefits the mayor, but there's a long time between now and November.
I also thought that was an interesting part about ranked choice voting, is that with ranked choice voting, every candidate has an equation, an algebraic, you know, theory about how they're going to win.
It's graduate level politics, honestly. You know, like you said, I ran the Senate race, the United States Senate race in New Jersey, but the Oakland mayor's race is much more PhD level in terms of strategy. And you're right, anybody who looks at the polls, if you're Brian Parker or Joe Tuman, the two folks who are not part of city government right now, and you see yourself in the single digits, you think, okay, nobody really knows who I am. It's still June, and I have a chance. If you're Rebecca Kaplan or Libby Schaaf or one of the other challengers who sees yourself, you know, in the teens or even in the 20s, you say, look how high I am at this point in the race. And so everybody sees a path to victory. Everybody sees that equation. All of their consultants are doing the math. And in the end, you know, in the next 5 months, we're going to see probably a very strategic and interesting campaign.
Now, you also worked with the Booker campaign for Senate.
I did.
Do you have his number?
I do, but I can't give it to you.
Why not?
You know.
You can't, not even right here while
not
the
even
cameras
right
are
here
on?
on television. A great guy, the senator is, and texts probably more than a campaign manager or his chief of staff wants him to. But a good guy, and I'm happy that he's in the United States Senate.
And you're protecting him from me.
And I'm protecting him from you.
I see what you're doing. Okay, but I did want to ask, New Jersey is similar to California in the sense that you have a terrific Democrat majority in the legislature. Sometimes you go for a little more of a conservative executive in both places. But talk to us about what it was like to work there versus in California politically.
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. I think you're right. They're similar in a lot of ways. I think the main difference, honestly, was that the state Democratic Party and the local Democratic parties there, you know, here in the Bay Area, you have influence. The parties have a lot of influence. But there, they have a lot of power and direct control. Really, if you don't get the party endorsement in a lot of the counties in New Jersey, for example, you really have no chance. Here, I think it's a little more democratic in that sense, in that the parties, you know, obviously have the influence that they they've earned, but you have Democratic clubs, you have a lot of activism in the grassroots, and that allows it to democratize a little bit, whereas in New Jersey, it's a little more top-down.
All right, so those of us in California who think we've got a machine at the top, it could be worse.
You could say that.
All right, terrific. Addisu Demissie, thank you so much for being here. For KPIX 5, I'm Melissa Griffin Caen.